My name's Daniel. I'm 37, a project manager at a construction company here in Chicago. On paper, it looks like I've got my life together. Steady job, wife, 2 kids. But the truth, some days I felt like a machine running on fumes, heading straight for a brick wall. One night, 2A, I was still glued to my laptop at the kitchen table. Blueprints scattered everywhere. Inbox blowing up with emails from my boss like a hammer pounding in my head. My wife and kids were asleep upstairs. And there I was, downing my 3rd cup of coffee, hands shaking, heart racing. And in my head, this ugly little voice kept saying, "If you drop the ball on this deadline, you're done. You're a failure." That voice, that was my villain, not my boss, not my coworkers. It was the messed up belief that I had to carry the whole world on my shoulders, that real men don't crack under pressure. That voice pushed me to burn the candle at both ends until there was nothing left. That night, the words on the screen blurred. Out of nowhere, my chest tightened up, like an elephant was sitting on it. I couldn't breathe. I thought, holy hell, am I having a heart attack? Am I about to die over a damn project? But the next morning, I slapped on a fake smile, drove to the site, and acted like nothing had happened. That's the real tragedy. I was alive, but I wasn't really living. I used to think I just had to work harder to push through. Turns out, it wasn't the workload that broke me. It was how I reacted to the stress. And that was the wake-up call I couldn't ignore. I'll never forget that morning out on the West Side job site. We were throwing up a 12-story office building. The head engineer had already warned me a dozen times. The steel columns were off. The concrete was being poured too fast just to keep the schedule. Deep down, I knew he was right. But instead of grabbing the bull by the horns and calling it out, I did what I'd been doing for years. I ducked. I told myself, you don't want that client breathing down your neck today. Just let it slide. Deal with it later. So I let my assistant run the meeting while I hid out in my truck, nursing a cold cup of coffee, trying to convince myself that ignoring it was the smart play. And then it happened. Out of nowhere came this gut-wrenching scream, the kind that freezes your blood. A section of scaffolding collapsed, dragging a wall of fresh concrete down with it. Dust shot up like a bomb went off. I heard steel clanging, men shouting, people crying for help. My legs were like jello as I ran toward the chaos. And then I saw it. Workers pinned under the rubble. In that split second, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My silence wasn't just about keeping my stress at bay anymore. My avoidance had helped set the stage for a disaster. By dodging a hard conversation, I'd poured gasoline on the fire. That day burned one lesson into me forever. Avoidance is jet fuel for anxiety. It doesn't save you pain. It just doubles it. After that accident, I couldn't sleep for weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the dust cloud, heard the screams. My chest was like a vice grip. I'd sit in my truck at 2 a.m., just gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding like a jackhammer, wondering if I was about to keel over. That's when my therapist told me about this thing called the vagus nerve, the body's built-in parachutes. She said, "Daniel, your body has a natural brake system. You just need to learn how to pull the cord." So I tried. First time, I sat alone in my living room, lights off, hands shaking. I put 2 fingers on my wrist, found my pulse, and forced myself to take a long, slow breath in, then let it out even slower. For a second, nothing. Then I noticed it. My heart eased up, just a hair. My jaw unclenched. I could almost feel my body whispering, "You're safe. Not under attack." It was wild. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning in adrenaline. It felt exactly like yanking a parachute cord after free falling. One moment, sheer terror. The next, the snap, the catch, and suddenly you're not plummeting anymore. That tiny shift didn't fix everything overnight, but it gave me something I hadn't felt since the collapse. A sense of control. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't control every blueprint or every deadline, but I could control how my body reacted when my mind screamed, "Danger." Deep. And that was my first lifeline out of burnout. After the collapse, my world was chaos. Families were grieving, lawyers were circling, and reporters were camped outside the site like vultures. Every time I walked into a meeting, I felt like I was walking straight into enemy fire. My brain didn't care if it was a courtroom or a conference room. It reacted the same way, heart pounding, tunnel vision, like I was about to get shot. But here's the thing. Most of those moments weren't actual danger. Nobody in that boardroom was going to kill me. Nobody in that press conference was holding a gun. The real danger had already happened. What I was facing now was responsibility, and responsibility isn't the same as mortal threats. So I started flipping the script. Every time the fear hit, I'd ask myself, is this a collapsing building? Or is this just a slideshow? That simple question became my anchor. With that mindset, I was able to focus on what mattered. For the families, I sat down with each of them, face to face. No PR team, no script. I admitted where things went wrong, listened to their anger, and promised full compensation plus long-term support. Not everyone forgave me, but they knew I wasn't hiding. For the press, instead of dodging cameras, I stood in front of them and owned the story. I laid out the safety failures, the plan to prevent them, and what accountability would look like. My voice shook at first, but remembering perceived versus actual safety calmed me down. They weren't firing bullets. They were firing questions. And questions I could handle. For the company and regulators, I pulled all-nighters drafting a recovery plan, independent safety audits, new training protocols, a fresh engineering review. I told the execs, we don't just rebuild concrete, we rebuild trust. Walking into those rooms felt like stepping onto a battlefield, but each time I reminded myself, this isn't life or death anymore. This is about making things right. And the moment I separated real danger from imagined, I got my power back. Insight. Not every fear deserves obedience. Some fears are just false alarms. And once I stopped running from them, I could finally start leading again. Here's the part nobody saw on the news. Those late nights when I was alone in my apartment, staring at myself in the bathroom mirror, rehearsing lines like a rookie actor. I wasn't born fearless. I had to train it, brick by brick. At first, just looking into the mirror and saying out loud, this was my responsibility, made my throat tighten. My chest burned like I was back at the collapse site. But I kept at it, night after night. Then I leveled up. I asked one of my closest colleagues, Jason, to sit across from me and play the angry family member. He yelled. He cursed. He slammed the table. My palms were sweaty, but I forced myself not to bail. not to hide behind excuses. Just breathe, listen, respond. Step by step, I raised the stakes. First, one-on-one with Jason. Then, a handful of engineers in the break room. Next, a small mock board meeting with a few managers. Finally, standing in the company's main conference hall with 30 people staring back at me. Each step felt like dragging myself into the fire, but every time I survived, my brain learned a new lesson. You didn't die. You can handle this. And slowly, the panic rewired itself into presence. So, when the day came to face grieving families, hostile reporters, and skeptical execs, I wasn't walking in cold. I had put in the reps. I had taught my nervous system that fear wasn't a command. It was just noise. And the payoff, for the first time in months, I wasn't running from the fear. I was standing in it, speaking through it, leading with it. It's past 2 a.m. in my Chicago apartment. City lights are still blazing outside, but inside, it's just me, a half-empty bottle of whiskey, and my laptop glowing on the kitchen table. The subject line on the screen, from Attorney for the Victims' Families. I've faced the job site. I've faced the board. I've even faced the press. But now, when it's quiet, when there's no one else around, that's when the ghosts show up. The guys we lost. Their faces won't leave me alone. My wife keeps saying, "Danny, you need to rest. You can't keep going like this." My hands are shaking. My chest is tight. I open the email, try to type some kind of apology, but I can't even get past 2 words. The screen is blurring. My vision is closing in. Tunnel vision. My heart's pounding like a jackhammer. I mutter to myself, "God, I think I'm about to pass out." And then it hits me, something my therapist drilled into me. Don't wrestle your thoughts when your body's on fire. Start with the body first. So I stop. I lean back. Instead of staring the screen down, I soften my eyes. Let them go fuzzy, widen my view. Suddenly, I see more than just the email. The wooden chair, the little vase on the counter, the glow from the streetlight outside. It's like my body finally whispers, "You're not in danger. You're just in your kitchen." I pull in a deep breath, hold it, push against my chest like they taught me, the Valsalva thing. When I let it out, I yawn. This long, ugly yawn, tears coming to my eyes. And for the first time all night, the knot in my chest loosens. I'm still exhausted. The email's still there, waiting. But my hands aren't trembling anymore. I whisper to myself, "All right, I don't have to fix everything tonight, but at least I didn't let my body drag me straight into the pit." Takeaway. Sometimes your brain won't believe you're safe until your body proves it. Calm the body first. The mind will follow. After that night in the kitchen, something in me finally snapped. Not the bad kind of snap, the kind where you realize you've been running on fumes for so long that even surviving feels like a miracle. The next morning, I dragged myself into the office. Same steel-toe boots, same stack of blueprints waiting on my desk. But instead of burying myself in it like usual, I caught my reflection in the glass wall. Hollow eyes. 2 days of stubble, shoulders hunched like I was carrying the whole damn building on my back. And that's when it hit me. Daniel, you're not Superman. You're just a guy who forgot how to breathe. So I started doing something that used to feel impossible to me. I began saying no. No to the 80-hour weeks. No to being on call 247. No to the idea that the project only held together if I destroyed myself in the process. Instead, I built out a new kind of schedule. I carved out time to actually eat lunch without my phone in my hand. I left the site at 6, even when there was still dust in the air. I blocked off Sundays as sacred. No emails. No, just one quick call. At first, it felt wrong, like I was slacking, like I was letting people down. But slowly, the fog in my head started to clear. My wife noticed it first. "Danny, you're actually here when you're home now." Then my crew started noticing too. I wasn't snapping at them as much. I was actually listening. And that's when I realized I can't control every deadline, every accident, every damn curveball life throws at me, but I can control how I show up. That was the shift from trying to micromanage the world to managing the only thing I actually own, my response. Takeaway: burnout wasn't just about overwork. It was about forgetting where I ended and the chaos began. Rebuilding those boundaries gave me my life back. These days, life looks a little different. The deadlines are still there. The projects keep coming. But I'm not the same man who almost collapsed at his kitchen table. Now, I eat dinner with my kids without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I take walks with my wife on Sunday afternoons. No hard hat, no headset, just us. And when the stress hits, because it always will, I've got tools. I breathe. I soften my gaze. I remember, not every fear is real, and not every fire needs me to burn myself out trying to put it out. Looking back, the accident, the sleepless nights, the panic attacks, they were hell, but they also forced me to face a truth I'd been running from. I can't control every storm, but I can choose how I weather it. If you're out there right now, running on fumes like I was, thinking the only way out is to grind harder, hear this. You don't have to break to prove you're strong. Real strength is learning how to rest, how to set boundaries, how to breathe when life is on fire. And if my story hit home for you, stick around. This channel, The Truth MD, is about getting real, cutting through the noise, and sharing the tools that actually help us survive the weight of modern life. So hit subscribe, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and let's keep building each other up. Because burnout doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the start of living life on your terms.